Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and it's the last day of the 50% discount over at the Potown store, so make sure you go ahead and get those codes while you can get them at the discounted rate. For today's video, we are going to be looking over the results of the regionals over in Daytona Beach, starting off with a nice Arcanine Labs breakdown of the day 1 meta. Then we'll have a look over on PokeStats to look at the decks that made day 2, and we'll end off on those top 8 deck lists. We only have 5, but we'll still be talking about that as well. So the day 1 meta seemed to be very heavily favoured in Mewtwo's presence. 85 players in the Masters Division. The most popular deck was, of course, Mewtwo. Obviously didn't win over in Latin America, but it did come second and had a pretty reasonable performance, of course, and a lot of people put their stake in Mewtwo. The second most popular deck was super surprising, non-GX Blacephalon. Now, I don't know if these are lumped in with Pidgeotto and Greens, or like what sort of, what's it called, percentage it was for those sorts of builds, but the bottom line is people were trying to smack with the Baby Blown an uptrade on tag team decks, which is really interesting, especially when we get into conversions later on. The deck that did win, Latin America, was the third most played deck, ability-based Charizard, 46 players. ADP, Malamar, and Big Blown all were tied at 34 players apiece in Masters. Then we have Pokedolls, a bunch of other decks. Gardevoir Sylveon, 21 players piloting that. A handful still playing Pikarom, 15 people. Then we see the Naguz deck that came out from the DDG players. Pidgeotto Control, Reshiram, more Ninetales stuff, other Malamar builds. Malamar with Ultra Necrozma sneaking back in alongside, I guess these are just pure Psychic builds of Mali, like the Spell Tag stuff that we've come to know. And a handful of decks in the sort of 1s and 2s down here as well. But yeah, overall, looks like Mewtwo the most popular. Blown's super popular deck. I know it was played a bunch on ladder, but I'm really surprised to see it be the second most popular deck, because you know, a lot of people still played Malamar, you know, and that's pretty bad for you. Obviously, Mewtwo being the most popular deck isn't great for Blown's either. So Blown's is a bit of a dodge and weave style deck, and a lot of people sort of put their stake on it, which is pretty insane. Obviously, it did bubble top 8 of LAIC, so it was like certainly a reasonable deck, and the Pokedolls gave it a bit of an extra breathing space, bit of an extra dimension. So, not super surprising to see it gain popularity, but in such a high amount is pretty insane. We'll have a quick look at PokeStats. It's a great website. It's a great resource for you. They have the breakdown of most of the decks in Day 2. Limitless have only got the top 8 right now. But there's still a few gaps. But still, we can have a quick eyeball of who did make it. Unfortunately, I'm cutting out most of the names here just with how my screen is looking, but it's so that we can see the decks on Limitless as big as possible in their visual view. But we do get to see the deck lists. This is after day 1. So the ADPs were sort of at the top. We've got some Mewtwo, a lot of Dolstall doing well as well. 7-1-1ers going into that day 2. A Malamar deck that played Venusaur Snivy GX for some spread. GX attack is pretty spicy. But yeah, just giving you a good idea of what sort of things did make it into day 2. Just by eyeballing, a good amount of Mewtwo, a good amount of Blacephalon, a decent number of ADP, Dolstall towards the top as well. Nothing too crazy, a good amount of ability-based Zard, a handful of Malamar as well, just from what I can see. And down at the bottom, a couple of Pikaroms, which is pretty interesting as well to see. But yeah, looks like Malamar actually had a way better conversion than it did over in LAIC. It had an awful performance in LATAM, but seemed to be a little bit better this time around. As we do move into this top 8, you can see a very wild top 8. There's 2 Gardevoir Sylveon decks, there's 2 Florgus Dolls decks, there's 1 Mewtwo, 1 Malamar, and then 2 ADP. Very strange to only see 1 Welder deck. Only 1 Mewtwo making top 8. No ability-based Charizard after it won the previous tournament. None of those Blowns. So in terms of top 8 conversion, even though there were a handful, not actually that many made day 2 with the Blown birds. It looks like a lot of people made a pretty poor choice overall. I mean, naturally they have a very bad Dolstall They have an awful Malamar. They have an awful Mewtwo. So that's a decent number of like bad matchups, really. So that's pretty crazy. But Malamar ended up winning this event, and I don't know how I feel about this. I remember sort of personally disrespecting Guardian in the Unified Minds meta, and it feels like I'm going to be doing the same this meta. For me, it really does feel like a dodge and weave. Again, we go back to this day one field. Yes, your Mewtwo matchup is positive, but the amount of Blounds in the room, the amount of ability Zard, and the amount of ADP, you know, not all 34 of them would have played Luke Metal, but a decent number of them would, and that's pretty awkward for you. Pokédoll as well, I think not ideal. There are some lists that are prepared for the dolls and the other control lists. Some Guardians won't. So it's a lot of dodging that Guardian has to do. Let's take a look at Drew's list, though. We can go to this snazzy new visual view from Limitless, which I'm in love with. I think it's awesome because it just makes the videos a lot cleaner. I'm not just looking at text now. You guys get a much better view of how this sort of thing looks. They're playing the 4 Gardevoir Sylveon, the 1 Lugia GX. Now, Lugia GX is a great include in this deck, similar to how we've seen Green Zard use Lugia GX. Now we can use the Lost Purge GX in this list to get rid of a Pokemon straight into the Lost Zone. This can be super insane against things like Lucario Mermetal in ADP. It can get rid of an ADP if they've just GX attacked and they haven't got an Ultimate Ray off just yet. You could do this against things like Charizard that are going to try and like Welder in the back and then wait a turn to like Welder a second time. Any sort of like big problem card, you can try and just Lost Purge away. And it's very easy to get a Lost Purge off because, of course, we're playing a heavy switch and tag switch count. So that's an awesome way that Drew has come up with to get around some of these real annoying walls, which is sweet. They are playing the Omastar line, that Fossil Bind ability, to really help out against the control decks. It's something I was sort of advocating going into LATAM. So they are playing the Omastar, Candy, Fossil, the sort of trio, which is pretty sweet. They've got the Faber in here as well to get rid of some special energies and some stadiums and whatnot. This can really help out against Celtic Swell, of course, for them to be able to get through Keldeos a little bit easier. Now that Mewtwo's established itself, these 2 Psychic Charms, I'm sure, put a big shift in. And they're playing like a kind of thin tag call package, the 3 and the 2 Malolana, no Guzmahala, no special energies whatsoever, just the 9 fairies, a couple energy spinners to go in there as well. The 1 Stealthy Hood can also help out against Ninetales, bringing stuff up, so that's also a nice addition. So yeah, very interesting list overall. Got the customs as well as the 1 Great Catcher. I think this list is pretty well balanced. I do still hold my hands up and say you got to dodge and weave some stuff. Don't face a bunch of Welder decks, basically. But the Lugia I do think helps out a lot. I think it's certainly a card that puts a big shift in. So yeah, interesting to see how Guardian performs going forward. I think Mewtwo will still be super popular, and being a counter deck to the potential best deck in format still, even though it only got 1 top 8, is still like a big thing that Guardian has going for it. Xander was able to get second with his ADP list. Now, a bunch of people played ADP. You can see Rahul also got top 32 with the same 60. I know a few other players played very similar lists to these guys, even if it wasn't the exact 60. The biggest outlier here is that Rosa entered the list as a 2-of supporter. It means that when you sacrifice prizes in those early turns with just like Jirachis, you can go ahead and grab some key pieces, or if, you know, your first ADP goes down, it's normally a sacrificial lamb. Once you've used Ultimate Ray, he just kind of goes down. Rosa guarantees you a reset stamp, which is a pretty big deal. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Rosa. I've actually been playing a lot of ADP. It's the deck I'm kind of focusing on for this quarter or whatever. And I have been using a lot of Bill's analysis in the list. I've pretty much played the 2 Bills in the slots that they've put Rosas in. And although Bill isn't guaranteed to get you stamps and stuff, I think he's a much more proactive card. Like, if you just happen to draw it turn 1. Because look at your turn 1 draw supporter outs in this deck. It's 4 Lily, 2 Cynthia Caitlyn, and 3 Tag Call. That's not a lot of outs. Yes, you have Cherishable Dedenes to just not brick, but Dedenne can be a lost condition in a lot of matchups. So your turn 1 outs are significantly lower when you play Rosa compared to Bills. And because you Ultimate Ray so much, you thin all your energies out of the deck. You naturally thin a bunch of your Pokemon out of the deck with Tag Call and all this other stuff. So I'm surprised to see Rosa in here over Bill's Analysis. Possibly going forward, I might play like a 1-1 split or something. Because guaranteeing Reset Stamp, I mean, it's still really good. But when you have Bill's Analysis and Stellar Wish at your side, sometimes multiple Stellar Wishes, it feels like you like rarely ever whiff your Stamp, and Bill's is like a better supporter turn 1. So that's my kind of 2 cents. I still think Bill's Analysis is personally stronger. But if you want to play the Rosa, you certainly can do. I'm a huge advocate of customs. I played it at my cut this weekend, and customs felt great. Again, Bill's Analysis makes them better, which is awesome. For gusting, there's nothing better than just like killing a Jirachi once you've killed a tag team, or vice versa. You're less weak to Stamp if you kill the non-GX first via your customs, then you just go through a big tag team, which is pretty sweet. The rest of the engine looks very normal. I think Counter Gain is a nice one-of tool include for helping the speed of the deck. You can get into Ultimate Ray much quicker, which is awesome. And it means that you're not like fully committed to just like passing for 3 turns, which can sometimes happen in certain matchups. One other tool that I have been playing personally is Stealthy Hood, just because I was heavily respecting I was heavily respecting Ability Zard this weekend. And Stealthy Hood really helped my Ability Zard matchup, so I think that would be a tool that I'd be experimenting with going forward, alongside no Choice Helmet in this list, which is pretty brave. I think you're pretty much committed to just trying to be like tanky Keldeo in that matchup, but I'm not so sure that that's the right way to go. I still think Choice Helmet and getting that GX attack off can be a lot of value, so that's an interesting one to sort of debate. I think in terms of Pokemon, the Mimikyu comes in as an awesome potential tech card for the Mirror. A lot of people play Drampa, of course, because it can be a Keldeo killer as well as a Dedenne killer. But Copycat with weakness obviously can be a great Mirror tech for knocking out ADPs. You can easily Ultimate Ray onto the guy, just like 1 energy, and then you can go for that Rainbow Copycat play. Guzmahala obviously able to scout out those rainbow energies as well, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, some cool stuff going on. There's the debate around Rosa that I personally have. Also seeing no Absol in here makes me quite scared, because again, I think Absol's a great defensive tool. Xander not playing Helmet, not playing Absols, is really just hoping that like the Rosa stamps kind of stick. And from my personal experience, when you're not playing Power Plants, stamps don't always stick quite as much as you would like to. So yeah, going forward, there's going to be far more defensive builds of this ADP, but at the same time, adding in Mimikyu, great Mirror Tech card. Rosa certainly an interesting one as well. So yeah, going to be cool to see how this deck develops going forward, because we know the solid shell of ADP at this point. Sort of it's 50 cards and then wiggle room for personal preference at this point. And Xander's brought some new twists to the table for sure there, which is pretty cool. Katron played Malamar, and I'm amazed to see Malamar see so much play. It, stat-wise, did horribly in LATAM, and nothing really gave me the impression that this was going to have a huge uptick in play from some of the more prominent players in the game. Katron, of course, he's played Malamar a bunch before, so it's no surprise to see him playing it again, but a bunch of people played Malamar over this weekend, and I mean, on paper, matchup-wise, you don't hate seeing Mewtwo, you don't hate seeing Ability Zard, and you're okay against the control decks, especially Katron's list, playing things like Faber in his list to get rid of like Sky Pillar for the Doll decks, which I think is a really cool include. It's actually something I discussed with some of my Malamar player friends over the course of the weekend. So yeah, it's weird where Mali's ended up positioning itself. I think Ability Zard still bodies it. I think this list doesn't really have any answer to ADP either, particularly. It's not playing Latios, for example. So I think there's a lot to be desired in this list to help out against ADP. Maybe you just take it as that fat L, but I think that's not really advisable going forward. So yeah, Malamar becomes its own sort of dodge and weave style deck. Still has its own consistency issues. I think there's a lot of things that I'm, again, pretty against with this list. Personally, it's just not a list that I'm a huge fan of. Again, like, this is complete disrespect to ADP. Playing 3 Viridian and playing only 2 Switch when Absol-based variants of ADP were super powerful over the weekend in Latin America. Just it's kind of like a spit in the face of ADP. You basically just say that you take the L to it immediately. Like, this list has no answer to ADP whatsoever. Playing Lana's Fishing Rod as well. It's a card that I'm like just super unimpressed by. Feels very slow. Feels like you basically never want to draw this card over like an extra spell tag most of the time. So it's a interesting include for sure. Faber I think is excellent. I'll give him props for the Faber. I've thought about playing one Faber plus one Cynthia Caitlin in the list to have a 10 support account. Cynthia Caitlin just being like a reasonable TV reporter plus get back a cool supporter card, sometimes Faber if you need it to be Faber. So that's something I've kind of experimented with in my most recent build. Nothing else is too surprising here. I don't really get the Mimikyu, but it can obviously help out against Mewtwo. Just trying to be super safe against Mewtwo, which is fair. The Blacephalon, obviously very good against control, same as SPDO. Esper still in the list with big snipes. Yeah, there's like it's still pretty much just the same core as Malamar that we've seen the whole time. I just think this list is just a hard L to ADP, which just kind of triggers me a little bit personally. But there you go. You can like some decks have taken a tactical loss here and there. If we go back to the stats, I mean, ADP, where was it? It was only the fourth most popular deck. Only the fourth most popular deck. But again, ADP's conversion, pretty strong. Like we saw, it had a good number of day twos. And there's two in the top 8, right? So, yeah. Malamar and Guardian are both dodge, weave, achieve decks right now, which feels kind of weird to say. We can't, unfortunately, see Isaiah's Florgus Dolls list, but we can jump down to see Grant's top 860. Grant lost in top 8 to Katron, who had the good tech cards for him, basically. And we can get a good shell of the list here. We can see... Oh, Isaiah actually played the same 60. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we do know the 60 cards. Easy. The DDG boys, I guess, in it together. This looks like a pretty solid core of Pokemon. Looks like they made a space for Wobbuffet in their list. Wobbuffet to shut down. Obviously, Victini Prism Star being a big one. Sometimes Mew Prism Star if people have specific like evolution tech cards to get around your dolls or whatever. Most of the time this is the Victini that they're trying to stop, I would imagine. They are playing Channeler. Obviously, you can Stevens into Channeler to remove those effects. It's of ADP, right, that they're trying to remove it from, so that they can only give up one prizes here and there. It's the same reason why they have the Latios, right? So yeah, you've got the dolls, you've got the hoods. That one Sky Pillar might have to be changing now if people aren't going to be adding Faber into their lists. But yeah, I think it's basically just taken the same shell that we saw from Andre in LATAM and then added those extra little tweaks here and there for a bit of extra defense against the decks that they were expecting in the tournament, which seems very fair. Dolls seem like an excellent deck right now. Like, jumping back to these decks, Mewtwo can be dodgy, but of course they have like Giraffe and Latios, so they can get around stuff pretty easily. Blacephalon is auto-win. This is auto-win. ADP seems fine with Channeler and Latios available to them. Mali seems like an auto-win unless they play Faber. Blounds is an auto-win unless they play Stinger. Guardians are auto-win unless they play Omastar. So you kind of go down. It's like every deck can kind of tech for you, but it's just if they do. And like for the decks that are playing common techs, you play the answers to the answers, if that makes sense, as much as you can. So yeah, Dolls still seems like a very, very solid deck. And whenever you have Steven's Resolve at your fingertips, you can just grab those instant response cards to whatever your opponent's trying to do, which is very strong. So the final list we see here is Will's. I think Will plays a very slightly different list to the second place list from Xander. It's playing the double Cryogonal to respect the control decks. It's playing the Tramper for Mirror. It's got the Giraffe in here for Mewtwo. It's got two Rosa again, so the Rosa lists have really been pretty popular. Again, I'm not super sold on it. I feel like you only need energies in like the opening turns, and Ultimate Ray does the rest of the work for you. So again, I pretty much prefer Bills, but I can see the want to go ahead and grab specific pieces. Cyrus Prism Star, pretty much a genius tech for the weekend. I don't know if he was expecting that much Blown Birds, but holy, he would have got value from Cyrus Prism Star. What a busted choice for that weekend. That's metagaming 101. The amount of Malamar and Blowns that he must have seen, just insane value from Cyrus Prism Star. Insane value, truly insane. He's got the helmet in here, he's also got counter gain, and he's playing the unit split rather than rainbows, which I also think is pretty fine. So yeah, other than that, again, going to custom catchers. I think customs are pretty much going to be a staple in the list going forward. I think they definitely seem good. It's interesting to me that he plays Cherishables, even though he doesn't play Dedenne. I feel like this could easily just be like a 4th tag call and a 3rd com, or like a 4th tag call and an Absol. Both the top 8 lists didn't play Absol, which really surprises me. I think Absol is super good right now. It's good against so many matchups. I'm really surprised to see no Absol whatsoever. For me, it's just been an MVP card for slowing people down. When you don't play End of Resolve on your own end, you want to have defensive cards outside of just Reset, Stamp, and Pray. But yeah, I think the Cherishables are really the only cards that I have kind of like an issue with, I guess you could say. The Cyrus Prism Star busted cool for the weekend. Really, really busted. And yeah, that's going to round out our top 8. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get more info on the rest of the Day 2 decks pretty soon. Keep an eye out for the Complexity Card Gaming Facebook page. We'll do that fancy pie chart for you. And yeah, going forward in the meta, I think ADP has to play that Lucario Melmetal. I think Guardian is still dodge and weave the fire stuff. For some reason, Ability Zard wasn't the most popular deck in the room after winning the most recent event, and possibly it will be going forward. But Guardian has some cool techs of its own now with like the Lugia and such, so I do think it is a bit of a threat out there right now. I think Malamar has some interesting decisions to make, if it is just going to take that sack, take that L to ADP, or if you're going to try and combat it and change your deck list up. I like the Faber so that you can be a control deck smasher. I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, overall Dolls is going to continue to tweak its list to answer the things that people are trying to use against you, if that makes sense. You have to answer the answers continuously with Dolls. So coming up with the next answer, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with that. At least 2 Sky Pillar might have to become a new staple option, for example, in the list. So we'll see how that ends up. Thanks for watching today, guys, and I'll be back tomorrow talking about the new Sword and Shield cards. I know I reviewed some of them on Saturday, I think it was, but we've got the rest of the set out now, so I'll give you my first impressions on that tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Cheers.